During my novitiate, I read a spiritual book that changed my life. It was by an author that I'd never heard of, but he seemed to be speaking directly to my situation, calling out my exact flaws, challenging me to be a better Christian. I've read this book 3 times now, and to this day is still one of the most insightful things I have ever read. After novitiate, I started to learn more about who this guy was as an actual person, and it turns out that he was an even more impressive priest than he was a writer. Looking around at the world and seeing loneliness, seeing how people with mental handicaps were treated, this guy decided, at 36 years old, that he was going to found houses where people of all cognitive and social abilities could live together. Not institutions, actual homes, places where they could get help, but also feel dignified, where they could actually contribute to each other. For years, he was a hero of mine. I read some of his other books, learned about his life. I saw it as an incredible blessing that on my retreat preparing for ordination, the monks at the monastery just happened to be reading a biography about him at meals. It was so inspiring to hear, so invigorating for me as a soon-to-be priest. I hoped that I could have the same pastoral care, the same wisdom, the same heroism that Jean Vanier had. At least, that's what I thought until recently. In what turned out to be one of the most crushing blows of my ministerial life, it was revealed back in February that this man who had inspired me wasn't exactly the saint that so many had thought him to be. Over 35 years as the founder of these houses, he had engaged in manipulative and emotional abuse of women, coercing them into sex. Unfortunately, situations like this have become all too common. You find someone who you can really believe in. In this world that can be absolute trash, you find someone who stands for the right things, challenges the world to be better, who makes you better, someone who's just a good person, and you find out something like this. I think of the way that so many people thought about Bill Cosby, the consummate family man, all-around likable guy, winner of the Presidential Medal of Freedom and recipient of 70 honorary degrees, only to find out that he had abused and raped women for decades. Lance Armstrong was a worldwide sensation for years, truly a feel-good story. Here's a guy who had his whole life thrown upside down by cancer, barely survived, and then comes back and wins 7 consecutive Tour de France victories, only to find out that he cheated with steroids and is a borderline sociopath. Most recently, the world has begun to rethink the legacy of someone like Flannery O'Connor, a once renowned storyteller and Catholic presence in the South. Her newly discovered writings on race have left people crushed and disappointed. Now we wonder if everything she wrote is tainted, which is just awful on so many levels. There's the despair of losing a hero, the sickness of having praised such an awful person for so long, the turmoil of having to decide what to do with them now. Do we cancel them, as we might say today? Change anything named after them? Take back their awards? Remove them from our classes? In many ways, it seems hard not to. Imagine being a spiritual director and handing someone a Jean Vanier book today. You have got to read this. This man is so insightful about community life. He gets the human condition, really pierces the heart. I mean, he used that insight to abuse women for decades, but hey, he might be helpful for you. Yuck. Trying to untangle what someone wrote, what they did at their best, with the person they actually were, who they were at their worst, that's a messy ordeal. As much as he may have accomplished in his life, as much as he was, no doubt, brilliant and holy and inspirational in one respect, it's kind of impossible to separate it from his lowest moments. The two things will always go together. Jean Vanier will always be remembered as a beautiful, insightful man, and a disgusting, embarrassing sinner. Maybe it is just best that we burn his books, take back his awards, rename all his memorials, and just forget that he ever existed. And then do the same for everyone else who ever lived. No, really, right? I mean, if we're gonna start going down the road where we are unable to reconcile someone's sinful failings with their heroic goodness, if doing something horrible negates everything they ever did, then let's at least be fair about it. The one who hasn't sinned, cast the first stone, am I right? Okay, that might have been a bit of an exaggeration, I admit. Surely we have not all sinned in the same way, and it helps no one to relativize the issue. What certain people do, what Jean Vanier did in particular, is way beyond any acceptable notion of we're all sinners, and so I don't mean to diminish this in any way. This is not a defense of him or anything he did. What it is, at least what I hope it will be, is a cautionary tap on the brakes, a mere question, a look at the bigger picture. As repugnant as certain actions are, and as tempting as it may be to delete people from history, I do worry that this sort of mindset could easily be taken to the extreme, that it may result in an expectation that one need to be perfect in order to offer anything of worth to the world. In logic class, we know this as an ad hominem argument, a logical fallacy that dismisses someone's position based on their moral character. If you're a bad person, you can never say anything correct. This, we know, is obviously false. But there's something even more important at play here. As Christians, we know that we are all sinners and so can hold no moral superiority over others, no matter how big their sins are. We know that our sins do not define us, but that St. Paul says, where sin increased, grace overflowed all the more. And maybe most importantly, we know that God can and does and always will use sinners to accomplish goodness in the world. That it's not about the moral purity of the one acting or speaking, but of the moral purity of God. Without giving people a casual pass for committing horrible sins, without relativizing sin, without uncritically forgiving people simply because they were once heroes to us and it makes us feel uncomfortable, I think we do ourselves a major disservice when we limit the truth to only those sources that meet a moral standard we approve of. Is God not capable of speaking to us even through sinners? What Jean Vanier did in his life makes me absolutely sick. Truly, when the news broke last February, I nearly threw up. It was like losing a close friend. Only I felt just as much anger and disgust as I did despair, much more like a betrayal than a tragedy. And yet, you can never take away the incredibly positive role he played in my life. You can't take away how his writings made me a better Franciscan, a better priest, a better human being. In a sense, I don't care how sinful he may have been or who he really was when he wrote that one book. You can't tell me that it wasn't the hand of God reaching out through him to me. I won't accept it. I had an experience of God that shaped my life at the hands of a man who did unspeakable things. Sometimes, as hard as it may be to accept, God can do extraordinary things through extraordinary sinners. And so, what do we do with the likes of Jean Vanier? How do we treat our fallen heroes after they disappoint us? Hopefully, for what they really are, flawed human beings capable of doing God's will. You see, the problem I think we have in so many of these cases is that we set ourselves up for failure. So often the problem with fallen heroes is that we made them heroes in the first place. We lifted them on high, built statues in their honor, named buildings after them, in a way made them objects of our worship. Not the things they did, not what God did through them, but the entirety of their person. I hate to say it, but this is always going to let us down. Every hero we have may not turn out to be a sexual abuser, a racist, a repugnant doer of evil, but every hero we have will always consist of heroism and sinfulness. It's simply the human condition. Even the saints weren't perfect. What I want to suggest is that we rethink the way we approach our heroes, that we stop elevating to unfair expectations, that we stop putting our trust in them and their ability, but remember and honor them for the work that God accomplishes through them. God is never going to disappoint us. God is never going to fall to some scandal one day, turn out to be an abuser or racist or complete fraud. When we put our trust in Him above all else, when we recognize Him as the source of all goodness, when Jesus Christ is the only true hero that we look up to, I think things will come into better focus. There will be no need to cancel this or that, no internal conflict at promoting a bad person. Our singular focus, always and forever, is to promote the heroism of God, seen in the saints, but also in the worst of sinners. We need not endorse the sins of fallen heroes to recognize the incredible work that God has done through them. I know it can be messy at times and leave us absolutely sick, but I say, resist the urge to cancel them completely. In our zeal to remove all that is evil, we run the risk of throwing out what is good as well. Look past the sinner and see the work of God.